Would you join me in prayer, please? O Holy One, you are our constant companion. You give us hope and wisdom and words to live by. If only we would listen more closely. Do not whisper, but let us hear your voice loud and clear so that we may craft a life that brings us closer to you. Guide us in understanding what you inspired so long ago. And may the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be pleasing and acceptable to you, O God, our loving Creator and living inspiration. Amen.
Amen.
We have all heard the story of the prodigal son. A young man asks his father for his inheritance and then goes off and squanders everything and then reluctantly returns home. The father is elated and there is a huge celebration over his return. It is a well-known story about forgiveness, compassion, and mercy. In the gospel, this story follows the stories about the one lost sheep and the woman who loses a coin. There's a theme here. In all three of these stories, the feelings of joy and celebration are brought to life over finding what was once lost and now returned. And as the father in our story today says, "For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." And they began to celebrate. Besides the son, there are the two other characters, namely the father and the older son. At different times in my life, I have felt a connection to each one of those characters in some way. If I think of myself as the prodigal son, it is usually during a time in my life in which I need forgiveness. A time when I know that I am not perfect and that I've probably done something really stupid. And I want to return to the goodness and wholeness that I once possessed. There are other times when I identify with the father figure. I have lost something or someone and long desperately to find what is missing, left behind, or hidden from my view. I can even remember that when I lost something that was near and dear to me, I recited a prayer that I learned in my Catholic grammar school. And it was a prayer to the patron saint of lost causes. It said, "Dear St. Anthony, come around, something's lost and can't be found." And for the most part, somehow that item would show up. So who are you relating to this time in your life? When you hear this story, do you identify with the one of the sons or the father? And what lessons do you take from them? Today I would like to look at this story from a slightly different point of view. I would like to take a step deeper into what is happening, or more accurately, what is not happening in this story. It seems that in our world right now, we could use some lessons on understanding things. We don't quite get it. Things we struggle to understand. We could use some guidance from God, and our Holy Scripture often provides us with those lessons. You know, that living life in a way that keeps us focused on being better, on loving more, on being a model, is hard work. It just doesn't happen, but requires us to think, to reflect, to pray, and then to see where we can perhaps make some adjustments. Remember that nobody is perfect, but it is a worthwhile goal to strive for. Today, more than ever, we may have shut down the alternative voices that exist in our own personal world. We might have a tendency to block out what does not gel with our own opinion, our thoughts, or our beliefs. And this is perhaps the largest impediment to making progress, not only as individuals, but as a community and as a species. While I was away on vacation, many things happened in the world. And it absolutely amazed me to see how little the world actually cared about what was happening in the United States. Did you find that true when you were over in France?
Yeah.
Yes. Who? I truly felt that the world was moving on without us. When I listened or watched the news while in Malta, the messages were about the cyclone Idea that created massive destruction in Africa, especially Mozambique. The pending future fate of the entire country of England over Brexit, and the massacre of people in New Zealand, just to name a few events. We were not on the front page, although we are here. In the United States, we seem to have shifted our focus to be consumed with ourselves, turning our back on the rest of the world. Some folks say that it is about time, and yet others think we are becoming too isolated. Now please hear me on this, that there is nothing wrong with caring about and working on our own country and our own issues. But I think there is a better balance. The one thing that all of this has in common is that we need to try and listen to one another and to walk in each other's shoes. And to stop for a moment and reject the hard judgments that we have of other people, places, and events. We need to be clear-eyed, and that comes with understanding and listening to one another. The massacre in New Zealand's mosques was created by hatred over a people who believed in something different. Xenophobia is a terrible thing, and we all know that there is similar hatred brewing in this country as well. The cyclone may have been attributable to global warming, through the changes in our weather patterns. And of course, Brexit came about over the divisive and wedge issue of immigration. But what if, I ask, we stop to listen to one another? Could we begin to heal, or at least to understand, and to gain more tolerance, which could lead to more forgiveness and compassion? Now let's go back to our gospel story for a moment. The prodigal son is often thought to be a bit young and impetuous, and maybe a little bit selfish and self-serving. He demands his inheritance and goes off and squanders it all, right?
Yeah.
But what if the son was not that at all? And we just assumed we knew. What if he grew up in an environment where his dad seemed to always favor the older son and acted like the older son could do no wrong, ever? And because of that, the prodigal son felt unloved, unneeded, and unwanted. That just might change our opinion and our understanding of this story. And what if the father and the brother took the time and energy to understand where the younger son was coming from, how he was feeling, why he was going, and recognized that role that they played in his life decision? What if everyone in this story listened more to the other person to gain a better understanding of what was going on? The same is true for the other two characters in this story. We have our opinions about each of them, or at least we had read about how the father and older son reacted. The older son seemed jealous and envious and perhaps felt that he deserved more, considering he chose to stay behind and work the farm. The fatted calf should have been his, and rejoicing should have been on his behalf. But what if? Think of all the different possibilities that older son may have been. The same is true for the father. What secrets or actions were driving him? Was he experiencing guilt over his part in driving his son away so that his reaction upon the return seemed a little over the top? If we take the time to know one another, to listen to the stories that we each have, to hear what the other person is saying, it just might change the outcome of our story. Take the event in New Zealand, or maybe the shooting in Pittsburgh last year. Do you think these two events could have been avoided if there was a deeper understanding of the frustration that was happening? It's so much easier to hate and lash out at people and things that we do not understand. And on the flip side, it is easier to tolerate and accept the things and people that we have come to know. The GLBT community is a good example of this. Even though GLBTQ people are still being misunderstood and hated and discriminated against in our own world and even in our own country, there was a time when it was much worse than what we have right now. But as more and more people came out and more people got to know GLBTQ people, beliefs began to change. We started to become not only tolerated and accepted, but celebrated and embraced. Because people began to talk to each other, and most importantly, to listen to the other side. As a matter of fact, today is a very good example. Today is the International Transgender Day of Visibility. How far have we come? But we have such a long way still to go, don't we? Where or who or what could benefit from your listening better? Do you judge before knowing the whole truth? Do you make assumptions about people or issues without getting the full picture? And on the same plane, who needs to listen to you? Who do you need to talk to so that they can understand you better? This idea of listening, I mean truly listening, is so very important for the healing that we need and for our future. If we jump to conclusions and make assumptions without knowing the full story, we're flat out wrong, or our chances of being wrong are about 99%. And that, my friends, reminds me of a story that I heard on vacation.
She finally gets to her story.
I finally get to my story. Miss Mildred, an elderly lady, was the church gossip and self-appointed arbiter of the church's morals and ethics. She did seem to stick her nose into everybody's business and their private lives. Church members were often found at the center of her whispers and speeches and judgments. They were unappreciative of her activities, but feared her enough to maintain their silence and just let her be. They did not want to be the center of her gossip or scorn. She made a mistake, however, when she accused George, a new member of the church, of being an alcoholic. She spread rumors about his behavior and even confronted him. She said, "George, I know that you're new here, but I think you better watch your drinking, my friend. I frequently see your pickup truck parked in front of the Red Dog Saloon. Like last Wednesday afternoon, it was there all day. We all know what you were doing, so don't try to hide it." He was caught a little off guard, but politely told her that she was mistaken. She should mind her own business, and he silently walked away. Upon reflection, he thought that she really needed to be taught a lesson. And so that night, he drove over to Miss Mildred's house, parked his big old pickup truck in front of her house, and then walked home, leaving his truck there all night. Miss Mildred tried very hard to explain the situation to people the next day. Miss Mildred did not get the full story on George, and that caused some problems. I think that we too need to slow down, be a lot less quick to judge. And we have to ask ourselves this question: what if? What if? My friends, my prayer for all of us today is that we go beyond the surface and begin to have an open heart, an open mind, and open ears. In our personal lives, in our political lives, and in our church lives. Step beyond our assumptions to reach for a larger truth. May it be so. And now we will have some silent meditation.